guest today is John Cochrane, Professor of Economics at Stanford University and Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. John spent most of his career at the University of Chicago. His research focuses on the dynamics of stock and bond markets, as well as on the relationship between deficits and inflation.
As we get this reopening back, we need to start moving people back to work. In the US, the US and Europe had a very, very different reactions in terms of policy. How do you see these two reactions differently, and how are they going to? How would you get people back to work right now after this period?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure the policies were that different. The policies were on the worker side, Europe said, we'll pay companies to keep workers on the payroll. On the American side, by and large, we have a paycheck protection program, which was aimed at the same thing. But at the same time, we also used the unemployment insurance system, vastly expanded to pay people who came home. Which is, you don't want to have a wave of mortgage foreclosures and evictions and a wave of bankruptcies in a 2-month recession. So that was, at least that's what was done in both cases. I don't think it's that different. The question for us all is not how to get out of it. A lot of those policies were predicated, I think, on a V-shaped 3-month pause, the long vacation. It's not going to be a long vacation. So lending money to companies leads to the question of how long do they want to borrow money just to do nothing, and as opposed to go bankrupt? When does that all fall apart? And when are they going to ever pay it back, or are they going to pay it back? And on the worker side, at some point you have to move from insurance to incentives. Rather than pay people to do nothing, people need a little bit of an incentive to get back to work at their old jobs or to go find new jobs. There's been big reallocations. There are lots of new jobs in America. Amazon is trying hard to hire people and can't find employees. Some businesses even want to bring their employees back, and the employees are saying, well, I'm making more on unemployment insurance than I was ever making with you, so I'm staying home and watching Netflix.
So what are you've suggested some policy ideas in your job. Can you tell us some of those?
Oh, well, when you're designing an unemployment system, you have to balance the insurance with the incentives. So at some point, you need to make more money going back to work than you do staying home. Mm-hmm. And you want to balance that with, on the other hand, you don't want to cause great economic pain of people who are unemployed. So, yeah, can you do a system where rather than go back to work and you lose your unemployment, maybe you can keep the unemployment for a month when you go back to work, and then you get the incentive and the insurance as well. Yes, that's expensive, but we're spending $5 trillion, so we could afford a lot. And back to the test, we're spending $5 trillion, and then we're being cheap about 20 million on who pays for the tests. I mean, come on. The U.S. also, by the way, so flexibility in labor markets is a big issue, I know, in Europe, and it's increasingly an issue in the U.S. When you're in a time of great turmoil, as we are, you want flexible labor markets. You want people, if you can, if your job at the factory ended and you can work delivering food for people, which is a big thing going on. It's very hard to get food deliveries going on. So you want an economy where people can run back and forth like that. Now, our regulatory state has been trying to stop the gig economy, but of course the gig economy is a great way for people to temporarily make some money while they're waiting for their company to be unshut down. So all these labor market, we've all said, sort of like St. Augustine, dear Lord, give me structural reform, but not quite yet. The structural reform policies would help all of us because there's big changes in the economy. It's not just the economy comes back on. It's different things. I think a lot of business is going to move out of cities. Restaurants, bars, and airlines may never, not for years, come back, but other things move in. Food delivery is a big one. Contact tracers, we need a lot of them. People taking your temperature outside of the grocery store, we need a lot of those. Well, people have to move from one job to another, and that takes a flexible labor market, not the sort of lifetime employment with a gold watch that Europe is certainly famous for.
Mm-hmm. You taught me my first graduate class of macroeconomics, which was I would say not Keynesian, which was a very much a real business cycle based class. And now we're talking about employment benefits and bailouts and liquidity for firms. We'll talk about all that. Are we now, as Bob Lucas once said in 2008, are we all Keynesians in the foxhole? Is this a moment where people like you or like other people who basically been working on a view of the economy, which is basically self-equilibrating, etc., think, oh well, maybe we change our minds? Or how do you read what's happening in that sense, intellectually?
There certainly is, all of public policy balances this problem of help versus incentives, which is just the hard, if you want to do cause and effect effective public policy, you have to recognize that the more help you give, the more incentive problems you have. It's especially, it's not so much, Keynes didn't talk about bailouts, but our financial system is bailout central now. And Bob may be right in that any of us put in the, you or me put in the Federal Reserve Chairman's seat, and a crisis is coming, we're going to throw money at it and worry about the moral hazard later. Well, but nobody's ever worrying about the moral hazard. Yeah. Those incentive problems are still there. They are not going away. And even as the economic recovery, what we were talking about with labor, a true Keynesian would say, there is no problem ever of supply, it's just demand. Give people enough money and supply will take care of itself. Well, we've been talking about supply, incentives, giving people the incentive to go back to work. Giving people money is not going to make airlines come back if the airlines are shut down by government decree. And it's not going to bring restaurants back if restaurants have to charge 3 times as much because people have to be spaced 3 times as far from each other. So we have a supply problem. We have a looming finance problem. If the recession keeps going and companies run out of money, which is a much more sophisticated question than just borrow money and throw it out and hope the demand for consumption brings about its magical supply. So you haven't made me admit to Keynesianism yet.
You're making a difference between an insurance function in some sense and this idea of aggregate demand management, which I think it's a basic distinction that allows for this. Is that the right distinction to think about?
That's a very important point. Right, there's an insurance function of help keep people from going bankrupt in a 3-month pandemic. Then there's the view that the way to get GDP going again is simply aggregate demand. Either borrow or print money and give it to people, and that's all the government needs to do to worry about the economy. So a real Keynesianism says that the key to getting the economy going is just to borrow money or print it and give it to people, and then their spending will get the economy going. And you don't have to worry about what's going on in the factories and labor markets and so forth. Where what we've just been talking about is the inefficiency of running a factory under social distancing, the need to get workers to go to new jobs, the need to get new companies started, new entrepreneurial. They need to have greater competition between companies to force them to efficiencies. They're non-Keynesian supply things. And I'm quite sad, actually. The Keynesians won the marketing. The U.S. bills are called stimulus bills. Well, that's not the point. The point is hopefully to keep the economy cratering through letting people not go bankrupt, but not this idea that just we need to give people money and the whole supply into the economy will take care of itself, because that's certainly not the case. And we need to do a lot of getting out of the way on the supply end.